After watching this tutorial, you'll be able to define and identify bias in your information sources. Frankenstein's in college, and he has to write a research paper for an English class. His topic is video gaming. According to the assignment, Frankenstein needs to find 6 reliable sources and must identify all evidence of bias in each source. Okay, Frankenstein, what do you know so far?
Reliable sources good, bias bad.
Well, that's a start, but bias isn't really as simple as that, Frankenstein. So what is bias? The dictionary tells us that bias is non-objectivity, one-sidedness, a personal and sometimes unreasoned judgment, prejudice or inclination for or against something. Does that help?
Bias bad.
Bias in source material isn't necessarily bad, but you need to be able to recognize it. Bias can be hard to see because bias is all around us.
Bias. Where bias?
Sometimes noticing bias is easy. Some sources present explicit viewpoints. Look deeper into sources like that to see if their viewpoints are supported with credible research and data. Some sources might provide information that is emotionally charged and clearly shows the author's views. Or, are they using emotion to persuade or sell you something? An author's opinion can clearly reveal bias. Look for first-person sentences like, I think or I believe. Often bias is not so obvious. Take a look at this organization's mission. The International Game Developers Association serves individuals that create video games. Is there bias here, Frankenstein?
Game developer. Like video game?
Yes, that's the bias. Often, though, bias is not so obvious. Most bias is subtle and will take some critical thinking to identify. Look behind what seems obvious.
Subtle.
Here's a tip. Learn about the author of your source. An author may not be explicit or open about her views. Do a little bit of research. By researching the author, you might discover their reason or intent in creating the information. A little research will help you see possible bias. You can also search for information about a source's publisher. Publishers can be biased too. Okay, Frankenstein, time for more critical thinking. Recognizing bias in sources is part of the job of research. Just as you would look for a source's title to determine relevance and date to determine currency, you should also think about its bias. Is your source a research study? Well, how is the research funded? Sometimes scholarly articles are paid for by organizations with a strong interest in the outcome, like pharmaceutical companies funding medical studies. For example, do you think an aspirin manufacturer may want to pay for a research project that shows the benefits of taking aspirin? Check the end of scholarly articles to see if the authors talk about funding in an acknowledgement section. They may even reveal conflicts of interest. Scholarly journal articles are often reviewed by experts. It's called peer review. Articles are carefully analyzed for accuracy. Those sources tend to be less biased. In the largest sense, just about all the sources of information we create are biased. Probably because everyone has an opinion on what is good or bad. Take a look at this advertisement for some nutritious food. Worms.
No, no. Worms. Bad.
But look, Frankenstein, those bloodworms are food. For fish. Is that bad?
Ah, now worms, not bad. Frankenstein, understand. Bias in me. Bias, bias, everywhere. As good researcher, Frankenstein needs to identify bias to know how to use information in paper.
Yes.
Alive! It's alive! It's alive!
In researching your papers and in your everyday life, always be on the lookout for bias. Develop a critical eye so you are well informed.
Me think.
Do my sources back up their viewpoints with credible research and data? Who is the author? Who is the publisher? What is the organization or website's purpose or mission? How is the research funded? Look for an acknowledgement section. And is the article peer-reviewed? Frankenstein, you have done so well. Here's your golden crown and an A+2.
Friend, good.